Hello and welcome to Coast AM's official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and of course, on coasttocoastam.com. Up next, Stan Deyo joins us. We'll be talking about the Garden of Eden. Did he find it? Find out next on Coast to Coast AM. Couple of major topics with Stan Deyo tonight. Research physicist and author Stan Deyo has worked undercover for the FBI as well as held a top-secret security clearance. He took part in the exclusive Black Project, which specialized in flying saucer technology. His expertise is also Earth changes and climate concerns. And here Stan Deyo is, back on Coast to Coast. Stan, always a pleasure.
Hey, good evening from the John Galt State, Colorado.
There is no Stan. Where might he be? Hello, Stanley. Are you with us?
Yes. Are you there?
There you are.
Oh, I don't know what happened there. Anyway, good evening from the John Galt State, Colorado.
Yeah, that's right. Who is John Galt anyway?
You bet.
Hey, I want to talk with you about a couple things. One, of course, is your work on the Garden of Eden. We'll do that a little bit later on tonight. But your thoughts on an expanding Earth theory. Unbelievable. Tell us about that.
Well, I started researching it some time back, a few years ago, and I got really serious about it here, back in May, June this year when I was going to give a public lecture. And I was trying to find out things in history that we could tie to a smaller Earth. And one of the things that really puzzled us, back then, was that dinosaurs are so heavy that they could not support their own weight on the bones that we've been able to dig up and analyze. And in fact, on the show images page I've got on our website at standeyo.com, show images, we link to a site that talks about this very problem about the dinosaurs, and it was just impossible for them under current gravity to walk around even. They couldn't support without breaking their legs and arms and stuff like that. So I thought, right, now the only way that I could see that they could walk around with all that weight would be if gravity weren't as strong. Now, all right, so then I developed, I used some equations that we normally use in physics to measure the difference in gravity if the Earth were smaller and were spinning faster. And I put the equations up there on the website on that show images page so that people that want to check my work can do it. But basically what happens is when the Earth had a certain amount of energy in its spin, and it was smaller than it is now by 20%, it spun faster, and the day was like somewhere between 16 and 19 hours long instead of 24. And it tried to throw things off the planet, if you get my drift. The centrifugal force was opposite to gravity, and it neutralized two-thirds of the gravity. So in other words, the dinosaurs didn't weigh as much. They weighed one-third what they weigh now because of the smaller diameter Earth and the reduction in the force of gravity, the net reduction. Now, of course, when the planet did expand, the dinosaurs were in trouble, and everyone else weighed a bit more too. The question became, when did this happen? Why did it happen?
And how big did it expand, Stan?
Well, we're now about, if you shrink us down 20% now, all of the edges of the continents will fit back together like a glove. If you don't shrink us down and try to put the continents together like the original landmass Pangea, if you don't do that, when you squeeze the continents together, they have kind of an orange slice empty space between the edges because the Earth is too big to accommodate them. But if you squeeze it down just by 20%, one-fifth of its, 4/5 of the current diameter, in other words, the continents all fit, the edges all fit perfectly. And there's Dr. Owen's work and a number of other people have worked on this and have done much more learned, papers on this than I have, but they all agree that the Earth was smaller at some time. The question is, how long ago? Now, modern, accepted wisdom in physics and geophysics is that the Earth's continents were all together in one happy little piece called Pangea, which formed about 300 million years ago and started to break up about 100 million years ago. Well, now that's fine. And, I thought, well, okay, I can sort of live with that. I don't believe it, but fine. then I started to think about over in Central America and North and South America, where they found clay pots and children's toys that were carved, which showed children playing with dinosaurs, triceratops, and that sort of stuff, with ridges down their back and fins. Now, how would they have known, even 1,000 years ago, what a dinosaur really looked like unless they saw them?
Good point.
Now, as long as I can stretch it back to the Olmecs, who were in Central America, even back that far, it was just a couple thousand years, they still had access to what a dinosaur looked like. So I thought, right, well, now, if the dinosaurs couldn't walk, if they were too heavy and gravity was crunching them, but they could walk when gravity was less, then gravity got more increased somewhere in, say, the last 4,000 or 5,000 years.
That's it?
Well,
wow.
But think about it. Think about it. How else could they be walking around and even flying? Those leathery winged flying dinosaurs. There's about 10 different kinds. But how could they have functioned if, in truth, the Earth wasn't smaller and gravity was greatly reduced when humans were running around with them? And I remember, I've laid down in a footprint path over in Glen Rose, Texas, where the dinosaur footprints are. Right next to it, cast in stone, is a path of human being, an adult male, going right along with the dinosaur. Now,
done at the same time, basically.
Yeah. Now, so this created a real problem in my mind. Look, that is such contrast to established radiocarbon-14 dating and other methods of dating with gases, argon, and various other things like that. And then I started to look up how we date these things. And I found about 15 different methods of ways to date the Earth, and no two of them agreed. They were way out. Obviously the biblical thing says 6,000 years from the Garden of Eden, and that's just from the Garden of Eden. I don't know what happened before that. But anywhere from that point to, 100 million years. And this is a big gap.
Now, is the planet, Stan, still expanding?
Well, it might be starting to do it again. I think
All
it
right,
leveled off.
Hold that thought. Let's come right back and talk about that and get into your thoughts about where the Garden of Eden just might be next. Back with Stan Deyo. So, Stan, is the planet expanding? And if it is, will that create all kinds of catastrophes for us?
George, I think it is, and it's not doing it rapidly if it is. All these sinkholes that we've been hearing about all over the world.
Yes, all over the place.
And down in southern, the eastern side of the Baja, in Hermosillo in Mexico, they had that, about 2/3 of a mile long
crack. It's
crack.
A big crack.
Yeah, about 25 feet deep. Well, that occurred, but it occurred over where there was an underground stream that had weakened the ground. And if you go back and look at all these sinkholes, and even the one over Louisiana, the Coin Bayou, all of these had to do with water underneath. A lot of them in Florida, water underneath eroding away the soil. But in majority of the cases where man has built structures over it, it has been over a water line, a pipe that is broken, actually pulled apart. Now, what would cause the pipes to pull apart unless we were seeing an expansion of the dirt? Why didn't this happen 50 years ago, 100 years ago? You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's a current event, and it's all these potholes, even though you can attribute them to water erosion, they are the result of water erosion from a new spring or from a broken pipe. And that, when you look at that, it says the Earth must be expanding like a balloon very slowly and pulling things apart. Now, this can also trigger more earthquakes, more volcanoes, and
That's right.
Surprise, surprise, in the North Atlantic. From the western side of the Mediterranean, at the Rock of Gibraltar, there's a fissure, or like a tectonic plate border going out from there and hitting the Atlantic Ridge and going up into Iceland. And you know what's happening in Iceland at the moment. That's right on the ridge, and it's tearing apart. And it's not just one volcano; it's two, possibly three, and it is erupting now along the long fissure. So all these things add up to me to say that we're starting to see another expansion. I think these things periodically occur, but haven't for a long time, obviously.
Can it expand to a point, Stan, where the planet basically just rips itself apart?
Well, hey, when it was originally 20% smaller, then everything was together in one landmass, and then it expanded, and it ripped Pangea
It did
apart.
rip it apart. That's true.
Now, why did it do this? Is this a normal function of a planet aging and a star aging? And there's certainly a lot of argument that supports that theory or hypothesis, because stars expand and explode and become, nova and that kind of stuff as they age. Now, planets, I'm pretty certain from studying like Mars and even Moon itself and moons of Jupiter, they have the same kind of evidence that we have on the surface of the Earth, that the landmass was smaller and has expanded at some point in time. Is it expanding now out there? I don't know. But the Pangea breakup, they said, occurred around 100 million years ago. It started. There was also a major meteor impact in the Gulf of Mexico called the Chicxulub, which occurred, at their best guess, maybe 66 million years ago.
That's supposed to be the dinosaur killer, right?
Yeah, there's arguments about that one way or the other. I think it probably had a lot to do with it. And the thing is, that is close enough by their best guesstimate to when Pangea broke up that I think it may have been associated with the breakup, because if you look at a map of the gravity of the planet, you can get that at NASA. I've got the map on my website there on that Show Images page. If people go to standeyo.com and then click on the Show Images link by the microphone, the first thing you'll see is a picture of the gravity map of the Earth, and it shows something rather peculiar. It shows very weak gravity starting at the Gulf of Mexico, where the Chicxulub meteor hit, going eastward out into the Bermuda Triangle, and then it's strong all the way across to the Indian Ocean. And when you look at the Indian Ocean, it's the weakest spot on the Earth for gravity. Now, if the Chicxulub meteor hit at an angle and didn't go straight for the core, it could have definitely sent a shockwave over to where India used to connect to Africa and created a bulge, boom, like that, and shoved India up to make the Himalaya Mountains and part of the mountains of western Iran. Now, that's why we have seashells and stuff on the top of the Himalaya Mountains, because they used to be lower and had sea flowing over them before the impact. And I think that these two are associated, even though, technically speaking, there's 34 million years between the dating of Pangea breakup and that impact. They're very close. And this then led me to another rather amazing discovery, which I think is going to tie modern geophysics dating to biblical dating, which I didn't expect, but it is there.
Could that be tied into the flood?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The flood, we've been able to date that mathematically by the tilt in the axis of the Earth, running it backwards to when it was vertical before it precessed to this angle. And we found that the date that whatever caused the tilt occurred was 2345 BC. And that would have been the time of the flood, right in that same period, or that same year. And within 200 years of that, according to other evidence that we'll talk about in a minute with this Garden of Eden tale, the Earth broke up. Pangea split apart and started to spread rapidly. It wasn't like inches per year like it's doing now. It was a rapid separation. So anyway, I'll kind of get to that when we talk about the Garden of Eden here in a minute. But
sure.
All of these things started to tie together. I called Holly downstairs. I said, Holly, you're not going to believe this. That Garden of Eden stuff. I mean, look, I showed her the evidence I'm going to tell you in a minute, and she just sat there and she said, look at the goosebumps on my arm. I can't believe it. It's real. I said, yeah, there really was a Garden of Eden, and we can find it with this information here. So I put the Earth all back together again, in the Pangea thing, and as best we could from all the different opinions of how it fit together, and started looking for riverbeds that weren't like little tiny streams, but they were real rivers, like the Amazon in South Africa, with over 60 million gallons a second coming out into the sea from it. Those rivers, that river exists now, and that's like 12 times the discharge we get out of the Mississippi River into the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico there. But anyway, the thing is that the smaller Earth would have supported much longer rivers, much bigger rivers, because gravity was less. But anyway, I did find one place where water came from on Pangea, the high spot, and it's part of the Great East African Rift today. And from there, I used Google Earth, and I went out to California there. I rang them up, and I said at the Scripps Institute, look, I know you guys are working on a very accurate plot of the depth and the patterns in the oceans, bathymetry. Could I possibly have that to put into my Google Earth so I could have a look? And they said, sure. And so they gave me it before they released it, 2 months before they released it to Google, and said, look, here, go ahead and try it out. So I did, and boy, did I find the four rivers are what? Wow. Wow. Anyway, it took a lot of disciplines, knowing a bit of Hebrew, being able to retranslate some of the old Hebrew and the physics and all that to get together to find the Garden of Eden. And I actually did, and you can see it today. You can go and walk there today. The walls of it are still up.
And, of course, the biblical account of the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve were there, is that conceivable?
Not only is it conceivable, in the place where it is, and once you see the proof of it, we're getting the DVDs from the lecture I gave, and it'll probably be first week of October before it's released to the public. But our film crew is now going to go down to Africa, where it is, in December, and film the garden in 3D. But they're also going to be looking and filming some other proofs of that being the Garden of Eden. One of them is that it grows the quinine fig tree, which is makes a leaf 10 inches long by 2 inches wide, and that's what you can sew together. It's like leather. You can sew together to make your, like a girdle or a skirt or something like that to hide your nakedness, just like the Bible said Adam and Eve did before they got kicked out. And when they got kicked out of the garden, when God took them out, He gave them animal skins. But while they were in the garden, they had to have access to a fig tree, and it grows while they're in the Garden of Eden where it is today. Now, I had to correct a lot of things in the English version of the Bible, the King James Version, because they did their best to translate and locate places that they could at the time. But they made one mistake on the second river coming out of Eden. It's called the Gihon in Hebrew. And so they say that river goes around the whole land of Ethiopia. Well, when you get into the Hebrew, it does not say Ethiopia. It says Cush with a K. And I had to find two Cushes, one that became Ethiopia, and the other is where Nimrod built the Tower of Babel over in southwestern Iran. And I did that by checking the names. And you can do this. You can go into Google Earth and look for names of places, cities, suburbs, counties, rivers that start with K, like Kish, Kosh, Cush, descendants from the group that Nimrod was from. That he didn't go with the rest of his crowd, of his family, over to Africa. He stayed and built, a mighty army and conquered people in that area from the descendants of Shem. But anyway, that led me to look for this mystery river, not in Ethiopia, but over in either a part of Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India, or all of India. And I finally
Great discovery.
Oh, well, I did find it. It was around India before it separated in that Pangea model when everything's together. The River Gihon went around the entire country. In fact, you can see the footprint of it in the ocean. Very, very distinct. And I'm going to make that file available to you on a CD-ROM with everything that I used to find a garden. You can just plug it into your Google Earth, and you'll be able to fly over and see everything, every river, every little rock that I went over a zillion times to prove this. But you will be able to see it when I get that finished in October.
What does it look like now, Stan, the Garden of Eden?
Oh, well. If you'll go to the Show Images page and click on the top row, the third image, I have a couple of pictures there from my lecture, which show you what it looks like from a satellite and from an elevation model. And you can see it from satellite. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 4... possibly 5 volcanoes surrounding a collapsed volcano, which collapsed a long time ago before the Garden of Eden. And this collapsed volcano was as tall as Kilimanjaro, which is close to there. It was over 19,000 feet tall, and it collapsed and fell into a hole there. And when it did, it left a perfect 102 square mile circle, a crater, with walls all around it that are still there today.
That's huge.
It's the only one in the world that exists today where the rim is still intact even. And the water supply for it, I thought, okay, here we are in an old volcanic crater. I said, how can anything grow there? And then I started investigating, where does the water come from for this volcano? And it comes from about 24 different water springs that gush, well, they used to gush up a lot more, but they gush up water up on the top part of what I call Eden, the main reservoir part, and it flowed down into the garden to water it. But the rest of it, the huge portion of it, went to form 4 mighty rivers that went one around India, one over through the mountains of western Iran and down east of Ashur, which is Assyria, and in the old days. And I found the Euphrates. It's one of the rivers, the 4th one. It was the hardest one to find because it was broken up into pieces, and I had to use that Scripps Institute bathymetry map, and before that became available, we couldn't have seen it. But it was the biggest surprise of all. But anyway, that does show us where the Garden of Eden is. If you look at that image I've got there on the Show Images page, and I show one of the what do you call it, the geysers or the springs up on the top part that punches out water even today, but it punched out a lot more then, and grooved holes in the surface of the earth around there that you just would not believe until you get in there and have a look at it.
But does this discovery, Stan, alter or change your thoughts on the Adam and Eve story?
No, it underlines it. I believe it now. Oh, look, right next to this Garden of Eden thing here, and believe me, it is there. There is no question about it. When I investigated on the Internet to see if what was in that area, okay, it's in Tanzania, in the northern part, which used to be called Tanganyika, in the middle of about 42 volcanoes area. It's, hot stones around there. But on the top edge of the Garden of Eden, or the Eden complex, is a volcano, the only one of its kind still active on the world. And the volcano is called Oldoino Lengai, means the mountain of God in the local native language. When you get up on top of it, you can actually camp on it because it erupts slowly, oozing magma out, and you can film it at night and get the red glow of it, but it's half the temperature of any other volcano in the world. It's only about 500 degrees centigrade, and it oozes up the magma, and it cools. It's black, cools, and then cracks and collapses into a white dust. And 17% of that dust is what you get in Alka-Seltzer. It's kind of God's joke on the earth, I think.
Interesting.
Giving you Alka-Seltzer for the pain. But anyway.
Yeah, really.
And I found out that the local native tribe that had been there the longest, longer than the Maasai, they say that crater is called Ngorongoro, Ngoro, Ngorongoro. That crater was where God made man, and then God went up into the sky and didn't come back. Now that's their legends, right? That's a paraphrasing of their legend. So, and they call that mountain, all the tribes, the mountain of God on the top part of it. And understandably, it's called a natron volcano. It's a very unusual, the only one of its kind in the world. And the Lake Victoria, which is kind of west of the Garden of Eden there, has a huge amount of water. And during the time when the Earth was smaller, the way the Earth was watered was by geysers, like Yellowstone, and by springs, gushing the water up from the internal pressure in the planet. And it tells you that in the Hebrew as well. So all these things add together, and one of them, particular, is a word that they mistranslated about the water, the river coming out of the land of Eden to water the garden. It doesn't come flowing over the ground. The word says it gushes up like the limbs of a tree into the air and falls back. And
it's a geyser. It's like a geyser.
Absolutely. I mean, when you correct these little tiny details, you start to find it. And I had somebody say, where were these big guards and stuff with the flaming sword that turned in every which direction to guard the Garden of Eden so the man couldn't get back in? And where were these cherubs, these guardians? And I said, well, if you look at what the word meant in the old Hebrew, it means they were big, powerful things, and the spinning sword with flame and everything, it also meant in the old dialect, it meant spinning, sparkling fire. And it was volcanoes that guarded the way, and it didn't guard the way, it lit the way to the Garden of Eden. And it just tells you, it marked the path so that when generations would come later, they'd know the Garden of Eden was there. And follow those volcanoes.
Stan, where did we lose the knowledge of the Garden of Eden? Because, here we have a researcher like you picks up on it thousands of years later. What happened in between?
I think that this was kind of kept at high levels of government in any country that knew about it. I do think that King Solomon, did know where it was for a variety of reasons, but he looked at the descriptions of these rivers that came out of the Garden of Eden, and one of them went around a country that was known for its gold. It's called Havilah. And, he had a lot of gold. He got it from three main places, and one of them was a place called Ophir next to Havilah. And Havilah used to join with Ophir, which is today called Madagascar Island, and that used to connect to western India in the Karnataka district, which all those have gold in them. But southern Tanzania, right up to the Kilimanjaro, right outside the Garden of Eden, had gold. Now, I think that if Solomon knew, in fact, I know that he knew, and he described where Ophir was in code. And Ophir, it kind of means like a wedge in some of the ancient language of Solomon's time. And in those days, when they wanted to split a stone, they would take a stone and cut a little groove in it and hammer a piece of wood wedge into it, cut another one, and we can finish that after the break.
Thank you for listening to Coast AM on our official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie, and don't forget to visit the Coast Insider membership area on coasttocoastam.com, where you can access our past, upcoming, and classic shows.